I love having John McMullen on our team because not only is he at Eagles practice and inside that Eagles locker room, we get all the national perspective as well from his coverage at today's pigskin.com. And he joins us now on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN with a closer look at Week 5's matchup between Philadelphia and Detroit. John, welcome back, pal. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Good to be back talking football as we get the Eagles game on Sunday after the bye week. This is an Eagles team, John. You've covered this league a long time. You cover the league nationally. You also are in that Eagles locker room. I think one thing that's being downplayed is the fact that the Eagles are healthy, and Doug Peterson came out the other day. I mean, Logan, we'll get into him in a minute, but basically said, injuries, we have no injuries. How unprecedented is it to be healthy at this stage of the season when you look at what's going on all across the league? And yesterday we talked about bad product and yada, yada. The fact that the Eagles are in full health at Week 4 is pretty unbelievable and I think pretty undervalued.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, a big part of this game and this industry as a whole is luck, and the fact that you can't have key injuries with your key players. And so far, it's still early in the season. They're coming off a bye week. The bye week was very early, so that helped with Zach Ertz and Leotis McKelvin, who are set to return to the lineup. But nonetheless, as you mentioned, all you have to do is look at the opponent this week and see where their injuries have hit, and guys like Ziggy Ansah, Eric Ebron, and DeAndre Levy. Those are some of the best players Detroit has, and they're not going to be on the football field. So,
is Ansah definitely out? Is he out, Ansah?
Yeah, Ansah's not going to play, and that's understandable. Terry Hyder has been sort of a surprise pass rusher and former undrafted rookie, but when you talk about Ansah, you're talking about a guy who had 14.5 sacks.
He's an all-pro.
And it is one. Yeah, he's one of the best weak side rushers in football. So that's one of the things, one of the guys you're going to circle when you're playing the Detroit Lions. So the fact that he's not going to be there, and I'm not sure if he's officially ruled out because I haven't seen the Lions practice report today, but all week, I mean, everyone in Detroit has told me he's not going to be able to go. So that's no surprise. He's been on the shelf. This will be his third week, I believe. So that's a big injury for the Detroit Lions.
Sure is. And, it seems like, all right, the Lions aren't good to begin with. They've had their struggles, but you're kind of catching them at a pretty good time. Eric Ebron out. Looks like Dwayne Washington, who's really the guy filling in for Abdullah, who's out as well. An ankle injury there. Wide receiver, Marvin Jones, who's been one of the better receivers in the league. He's on the injury report. So this is a Lions team, number one, not a great team to begin with, but they're pretty banged up coming into this matchup.
Yeah, Abdullah, you mentioned that's a guy he was their starting running back. He's gone for a year, most likely, with a foot injury. And that's not something they're really good at anyway. So all of a sudden you have to put more on the plate of Theo Riddick. And Riddick's an interesting guy. He's one guy you have to worry about because if you remember that Thanksgiving Day last year, he just tortured Michael Kendricks in coverage. He might be the best back coming out of the backfield as a receiver in football. But all of a sudden, when you have to count on him to be more of a runner and as well and more of a three-down back, that makes him less effective. So not only are the Eagles, again, playing an opponent that isn't all that good to begin with, they're getting them at a perfect time. And, hey, some of it is you just tip your hat and say thank you to luck and say this is the perfect time you want to play the Detroit Lions. And I think the Eagles have a very, very good opportunity to keep this going.
Yeah, Ansah, by the way, is out. Ruled out officially. DeAndre Levy also. Ebron, those three are out. Doubtful Washington. Questionable is Jones. So a couple of major injuries for the Detroit Lions. Let me ask you, yesterday you're 5 on the Lions, which we didn't get into. Give me a couple of things about this Lions team that, do stand out, because they did beat the Eagles 45-14 just 1 year ago, less than a year ago. So what are some of the things that they do?
Well, I think number one, that was a different team. Again, if you take some of the names the Ansas, the Abdullahs, the Ebrons out of the lineup, obviously they're not the same team, and that's what the Eagles are going to be going against. So that's number one. Number two is they're not playing well as a whole. They're very susceptible to penalties. They're third in the NFL. They have 39, so they're basically averaging 10 a game. That tells you they're not a disciplined team. So on top of the fact that there's not a ton of talent there, you also have themselves shooting themselves in the foot quite a bit. And Jim Caldwell talked about that this week. If you're looking for something that you have to be concerned about, it certainly is the passing game, because Matthew Stafford does have tremendous arm talent. Jim Schwartz talked about that earlier this week. And even though Calvin Johnson isn't there, and that's another reason last year's game doesn't mean all that much, they do still have some talented receivers, and guys like Marvin Jones. You mentioned he's questionable. I think he's going to play from everyone I talked to in Detroit. You add that to Golden Tate. Anquan Bolden is out there, veteran receiver. We all know how productive he could be. And as I mentioned, Riddick coming out of the backfield, that might be the toughest matchup to deal with. So they do have some guys that can really create problems in the passing game.
Yesterday, we didn't get a big chance to talk about it because Schwartz did speak yesterday. But, he's an interesting cat. But do you sense that this is a pretty big week for him? Is this something that he is really looking forward to?
Yes and no. I mean, Jim was really honest, and he said you'd be surprised at, how many people I root for out in that organization. Because he's still got a lot of relationships, not only with some of the players he had, but some of the front office people and some of the office people as a whole that are still in that organization that he likes and built relationships with. And he basically admitted that every other week he roots for the Lions, and that'll shift this week, and he doesn't want them to do well. And anyone who knows Jim Schwartz knows he's going to do everything possible to make sure the Lions don't do well. And he also mentioned he's already been back with Buffalo, so he's already been over that hurdle. But sure, I mean, anytime you're fired in the NFL and you go back and beat the franchise that fired you, it's got to be a little bit exciting for you, and you certainly don't want to lose. You certainly don't want that narrative put on it.
No, and one thing that I think the storyline in this game is that Schwartz, to me, is on that road to wanting to be a head coach again, which means he wants this Eagles team to be recognized for their defense. Right now, it seems like the defense is like a nice story, but it's Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson. But I think Schwartz is the kind of guy who's like, I want to be recognized that this team is winning because of my unit.
Well, it's interesting. I think it's different. I think the national story, and to the casual public, it's obviously going to be on the rookie quarterback because that kind of story. But I think people in the league already know that, already understand it, that defense has been fueling this team and is the main part of their success. Not to say the full part, because Carson has certainly played very, very well, but I think everybody in the league knows the strength of this team is the defense. And you mentioned being a head coach. People have already sort of made the comparison of Andy Reid and when he came to Philadelphia and brought in Jim Johnson and how well that worked out. And I agree with that part, but the part that doesn't really compute with that comparison is the fact that Jim wasn't really ever looking to move on. He was comfortable. Jim Johnson, I'm speaking of, was comfortable with being a defensive coordinator. Jim Schwartz isn't sticking here. And by the way, if things continue to go the way they're going right now, he's going to be one and done because he is going to be a head coach in this league.
Yeah, and that's an interesting take because one of the reasons why I think the Eagles had their run and then began to fall off is because people start to pluck your coaches when you have success. And Andy, no one plucked Jim Johnson, but they plucked Harbaugh and Rivera and Childress, and maybe these guys didn't succeed other places, but that catches up to a team, pretty quickly. So, having Jim Schwartz around for this year, you wonder, is there a guy that's in the pipeline that they would feel comfortable handing things over if, that's neither here nor there, that's down the road. But just to, have a guy like that who's really coaching to get out of here.
Well, yeah, I don't necessarily – I didn't mean to frame it like that.
Not get out of here because he doesn't like it here. Get it out of here because he has higher goals.
Because he just wants – yeah, exactly. And I just mentioned it because he was actually asked that question, and it's 3 weeks into the season. That's how well he's performed. He said, he was asked, do you think about becoming a head coach yet? And he made a very good point that once you're in the NFL season, there's not enough time to worry about stuff like that. You got to do your job. You got to prepare for what's coming up the next week. And I think that's where they are. But as we get later into the season, if the Eagles are continuing to perform well, if the defense continues to be a top 10 level defense, I think at that point, Howard Roseman and Doug Peterson have to realize it's going to be a very, very short-term thing for Jim Schwartz in Philadelphia, because he's going to be on the top of a lot of coaching lists when there's and we know from the history of the NFL, Mike, there's going to be 7 or 8 openings somewhere in that range every off season. If things continue going the way they're going right now, he's going to be at the top of a lot of those lists.
No doubt about it. And when you're giving up an NFL low 9 points a game, they're the only team in the league that hasn't allowed a passing touchdown. Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, 3 sacks apiece. They're one of the best league, teams to get into the quarterback here. How's this matchup for Jim's defense against this offensive line?
Really, really good. I mean, we'll see. Benny Logan, you mentioned, is questionable now. He hurt his calf in practice yesterday, and we'll see if he's able to go. That's a concern because, we talked about it earlier in the conversation. Health is a key part of this game, and dating back to the preseason, we mentioned, especially with this defense, they're pretty good when you have the starters out there. But all of a sudden, if a key player starts to get dinged up and you got to go to reserves, we've already seen it at cornerback. They've been able to withstand it with a rookie 7th-round pick in Jalen Mills. All of a sudden, if Benny Logan's not able to go, you got to go to an undrafted free agent, Destiny Vallejo. So you can see sort of the drop-off. So the depth isn't there yet from a roster standpoint. But Jim has already proven he will tweak things to make sure he can mask as many deficiencies as possible. And I expect that to continue because one of the weaknesses of Detroit is their offensive line. I don't think anybody knows Matthew Stafford as well as Jim Schwartz. He knows what he does well. He knows what he does poorly. And the key with Stafford has always been when he gets pressured, the mechanics break down. And all of a sudden, when the mechanics break down, that's when the mistakes come. So he understands that better than anyone, and he wants to rush him, get him off his comfortable spots, and sort of make him throw before he wants to.
All right, John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. We'll get his pick on the game coming up. If you just can't wait for it, you can get it right now on the website, 97.3 ESPN.com, where he's got 5 on the Lions. Check that out. And his pick for the game, or we'll give it to you coming up in just a bit. But I do want to get some Week 5 thoughts from you, John. As last night San Francisco loses again. They look poor. Blaine Gabbert, the quarterback situation. They've got Kaepernick sitting there. Ponder, his name has been brought up. Chip Kelly, a disaster out there so far in San Francisco.
No surprise. The quarterback-proof offense is not Blaine Gabbert-proof. I'll say that. And if you're talking about Christian Ponder, he might be a poor man's Blaine Gabbert. That's how bad he is. So it comes down to, can Colin Kaepernick play? Can he recapture some of the things he had when the 49ers were going to a Super Bowl and 3 straight NFC championship games? And I don't know. He's had 3 off-season surgeries. There's no question to me if Colin Kaepernick was in shape, he would have already been the starter because That's how bad Blaine Gabbert is. But
why is he out of shape?
Well,
as 4 weeks into the year,
he had 3 off-season surgeries, and he was feuding with Trent Baalke, the GM at the time, in the off-season. So when he had those surgeries, he had him in Colorado at the Stedman Clinic. He didn't rehab with the 49ers. He didn't rehab at the facility. And obviously he didn't do the job he should have done as a professional. By his own estimation, he's lost about 20 pounds. If you just look at him, he doesn't look like the same guy. If put on a Super Bowl tape or anything of that nature, he's much bigger, much stronger. So he's not the same guy. And then you go to training camp when he finally does show up, and he missed a lot of that with a dead arm. Or that was the explanation for what was going on with him. So Chip said it last week when the questions started coming up and people were asking him, look, Blaine Gabbert's so bad, are you at least considering making a change at the quarterback position? And he basically said Colin's not ready to play from a physical standpoint. So if that changes, I imagine he's going to be the starting quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. And if it gets to a certain point where it's so bad with Gabbert, we might have seen that last night, he may throw him in there before he is ready physically.
Tom Brady's back this week. Deflategate is officially in the books. Perfect spot for Brady. Doesn't have to be at home. Goes on the road to Cleveland against maybe the worst team in the league.
Yeah, I mean, when you're away for 4 weeks and at his age, I do think it is going to be – he's not going to hit the ground running, and you're not going to see the same Tom Brady as you're used to seeing. He's going to take a couple weeks to ramp up. But as far as an opponent, yeah, I mean, this is not a better opponent you could possibly have because you can have a few hiccups and still probably easily win that game. And that's what I expect to happen. But, yeah, I think he'll have some hiccups and some struggles trying to get up, sort of like baseball players miss spring training. I mean, when you're out that long, you sort of got to get back into it, get the feel for it, and it's going to take a little while.
All right, let's go inside the NFC East. Washington's going to Baltimore here. Washington's won 2 in a row. Don't know if we're impressed with that, but should we be taking a closer look at them?
We'll see this week. I mean, Baltimore is 3-1, but and that looks pretty impressive, but they haven't played that well. All 4 of their games have been very, very close. And they lost to the Raiders last week. I think one of the bigger issues is Ronnie Stanley, the rookie left tackle, was out, and they struggled in pass protection. But it looks like he's going to miss the game this week as well. So this is a big game because Washington dug a hole for themselves early in the season. But all of a sudden, if you can peek your head above 500, start gaining some confidence, then I think you have to look at the Redskins, especially considering that they host the Eagles the next week. If they win this game, they start becoming relevant again.
Yeah, that's interesting. They play a Baltimore team who is at home for the second straight week, and that means they would lose at home for 2 straight weeks if Washington wins there. Let's look at the New York Giants. They're taking on Green Bay on Sunday night. Giants had their troubles on primetime last week, and now they're going against another NFC North foe here, another game on the road for the Giants. Is this a 3rd straight loss for Big Blue?
I would think so, certainly on paper. Very difficult spot for them, and they knew that coming into this 2-week stretch to go to Minnesota and Green Bay. And that's why losing a game they really had in their grasp the week before against the Redskins was such a devastating loss for them because the schedule just didn't work out well for them after that. And I think all eyes will be on Odell Beckham and if he can control himself because it was evident against Josh Norman that the emotional part of his game is becoming unglued. Mike Zimmer saw that, and he sort of told his big physical corner, Xavier Rhodes, to beat him up, and he lost it again. And the difference between Washington and Minnesota is Norman doesn't have really the backup and Beckham was still able to put up numbers. Minnesota has a backup, and he didn't do anything. And Green Bay has some decent corners as well, not as good defensively as Minnesota, obviously, but I think they're going to play up the same part, and they're going to test him, and they're going to see if he loses control again, because when he does, it affects his game. And for all those people who are saying this is a media-driven creation, his head coach brought it up. His quarterback brought it up. So this franchise is very, very aware that Odell Beckham Jr. is hurting them basically every week now.
Dallas, another team that has interesting storylines, it seems like, every single week. And they're at home this week against Cincinnati. I like Cincinnati, but they're on the road this week. But if Dallas, if they win a game like this, you got to start taking a look at them, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm already looking at Dallas. I got on a national show yesterday, I got the question, am I sticking with Dak Prescott over Tony Romo? And for the first time, I said, if he continues to play at this level, I'm sticking with Prescott. The Cowboys are second in the NFL on offense. And it's completely rookie-driven because you have the quarterback and the running back, Ezekiel Elliott. But this is a young man's game. And I started to ask myself, at this point in their career, what does Tony Romo do better at 36 years old than Dak Prescott? And it's basically nothing from a physical standpoint. The experience plays into it. But if Prescott keeps playing well and doesn't make mistakes, that sort of evaporates. And you have to stay with the hot hand. And I think the Cowboys are very, very relevant. And this is a nice spot for them, because while Cincinnati is a very talented team, Tyler Eifert was scheduled to be back, but he had a setback in practice, and he's not going to be there. So the Bengals will continue to be without one of their top red zone threats, and that makes it a little bit easier to play them. So it's one of those situations we talked about with the Eagles and the Lions. You get a big break as far as the injury situation goes.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. And, of course, a lot going on in the NFL. Week number 5 coming up. As we've basically been having this conversation, a lot of injury news on the Lions has come out. So Dwayne Washington, as we told you, doubtful. Ebron out, and Ansah out, Levy out. So they've got a lot of starters that are not out there. We're talking about week 5 and going to week 6. Chip Kelly will not name his starting quarterback. That's just coming out now as well. So there's a lot going on as we get ready for a week 5 of the NFL. The Eagles, of course, had that bye week, so they are 3-0. Moving on to face a 1-3 Lions team. John, let's go back to that one and get your pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a perfect situation for the Eagles. I don't think Detroit has the firepower offensively or defensively, for that matter, without Ansah and Levy, who are 2 of their 3 best defensive players, are not going to be there. So I think even though it's a road game, even though the Eagles, under a different regime, were blown out by the Lions on Thanksgiving Day, this is going to be a completely different game, and I think it'll be pretty easy for Philadelphia. I got them winning 27-14.
27-14, John McMullen has for Philadelphia. Write that score down. Maybe somebody wants to use it for tonight's Pick the Perfect Score. That's coming up in about an hour from now, and if you hit the score on the nose, you can win $400 thanks to Shore Toyota. John, you are not eligible.
I know that.
All right,
and you don't have to worry. You never win.
No, 27-14. All right, that's the score. I'll give you mine coming up in about an hour as well. He's John McMullen. For more on the Eagles-Lions this weekend, go to 973ESPN.com. Follow John on Twitter at JFMcMullen. And for all his national work, go to todayspigskin.com. John, enjoy the weekend, my friend. We will chat on Monday.
All right, Mike. Enjoy the game. Thanks.